Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. So if you've been following for a couple of weeks, you might know that I announced that I would be returning back to Japan for the first time in 8 years. And this was a huge milestone for me because 10 years ago was the first time that I had ever traveled to Japan, ever traveled abroad, ever lived abroad, ever even been out of the country for any reason whatsoever. However, due to unforeseen circumstances, I will most likely have to delay this trip until next year. But instead of traveling to Japan, I decided that I'm going to do something a little bit different for the next couple of weeks. I decided that I'm going to tell my story about studying abroad in Japan from beginning to end. Bear in mind, I'm a first-generation college student. None of my family had even gone to college, left New York City where I was born and raised, traveled outside of the country, let alone lived outside of the country. I had nobody in which could tell me or give me advice for what to do, and I had to figure out everything on my own. So I made a lot of mistakes. I was also very young and had massive social anxiety. So the alternative title of these series of videos is gonna be What Not to Do When You're Studying Abroad. But not all of it was bad. I had some amazing experiences. Both the most amazing experiences and the worst experiences of my life up until that point happened in those 4 or 5 months that I was there. So this takes us to today's topic: how I took my first international flight and didn't eat for almost 20 to 22 hours. So when I first decided I was going to study abroad in Japan, I was about 20 years old, a junior in college. And at the time, like a lot of people in their very early 20s or late teens, my parents did a lot of things for me. And in particular, they decided they were going to help me buy my flight. Mind you, my parents had never flown more than 3 hours, and that would be going to Florida like most New Yorkers do. They'd never been abroad, they'd never traveled abroad, but I also had never bought a plane ticket at the time. This was mistake number 1. And mistake number 2 is that I very much overpacked. My rule now is that if you can't comfortably carry everything on your own, you are packing too much. At the time, I packed a giant oversized suitcase that was probably 70 pounds, and I had a book bag, and I had a smaller carry-on. That's like 90 to 100 pounds worth of stuff. And what ended up happening is that I didn't even use half of it. But I didn't realize this mistake immediately, because when I got to the airport, my parents helped me bring everything in, and we went to the desk, and we gave them my luggage. I didn't have to carry the big luggage with me initially for the first whole part of my travel. For more context, the flight from New York to Japan is about 14 hours. At that time, I didn't know what that would look like. Eventually, I learned that I actually sleep pretty well on planes, and that first flight I did maybe 3 hours at a time. So I slept for 3 hours, I'd wake up, I'd watch a movie, it's about 2 hours, I'd sleep again, wake up after 3 hours, watch a movie. So my first 14-hour international flight wasn't that bad, except for one thing, and that is when it came time to eat. It's about 2 hours into an international flight and 2 hours before landing. The whole food carts roll out. So here's what happens. The lights go on, everyone starts pulling their tray tables down. And I notice, so I pull mine down too. And I'm excited. I see the stewardess coming by each row. They're handing out food to everyone, and I can peer across and see that everybody's getting one of 2 things. Either kimchi, because we were on a Korean flight, or they have the option of like a steak and potatoes, and it looks really good. And I'm like, man, I'm hungry. I can't wait to eat that. But then the stewardess gets to my aisle, and they give the old Korean couple next to me their food. They got the kimchi, and they don't give me anything. And I'm like, excuse me, do I get some food? And they were like, hold on. They go through the rest, they give everybody on the plane their food, and then they come back with mine. And they give me this tray of food that is essentially like unseasoned chicken with nothing on it, and I don't even like vegetables that were unseasoned as well. And I am such a picky eater at this time. I take like 2 bites of it, and it's like I didn't want it to begin with, but when I asked the lady, I was like, excuse me, I want the steak that everyone else is having. And they're like, you can't because you pre-ordered to have a bland meal. So if you rewind a couple of weeks ago when my parents had bought my plane ticket, they had the option of buying an international meal on the flight. And they didn't know what to do because they had never been on an international flight. And they assumed, what if Jessica doesn't like the food on the plane? We should give her bland, because if it has no taste, it can't possibly taste bad. I'm not entirely sure of what the logic was, but it was well-intentioned. But the result is that the lady on the plane refused to give me a regular meal. She said, Basically, all of the meals are pre-planned exactly to the customers that they're going to. They don't have any extras, and because I ordered that one was set aside for me, and the other meals had to go to the other people. Now, this is not entirely true because I realized later they actually have tons of extra meals. Not everybody wants to eat anything. So as long as you wait for everybody to go and finish and get fed, if there's something extra laying around, they usually give it to you. She was giving me a bit of a hard time. So, again, I get this food, I take a few bites, it's gross, I don't eat it. I'm still hungry. I can't do anything about it. Whatever, I watch my movies, I go to sleep. 2 hours to the end of the flight comes, same thing. They give me a bland breakfast while everybody else is having eggs of like oatmeal. And I don't eat oatmeal, and again, I'm a picky eater, so I refuse to eat it. And that is the end of that story. Then we land in South Korea, Incheon Airport. It is my first time ever being in a country that is not the US, and I'm very excited. I forget completely about being hungry. I am just in wonders of this airport with everything written in Korean, but it's also 3 o'clock in the morning and nobody's there. And I have 5 hours before my next flight. I check my ticket, it doesn't say where the gate is. I'm running through this airport, I don't know where to go, and I'm trying to find a person to help me. And I find one Korean person, and when I try to say, "Excuse me, can you help?" pointing at the ticket, they go, because they got scared because I speak English, and they think that they won't be able to communicate with me because they don't speak English. Although all they had to do was point to the thing and point to somewhere and I would have went, but it's okay, I'm not mad. I eventually learned that there's those big boards that have all of the flights on it. So I didn't know that at the time, but I found it. I found where my gate was, and I was super excited, and I got there, and nobody was at this gate, because it was still 3:30 a.m., and I'm by myself in South Korea, and I filmed a video. And I filmed my YouTube video, and I just watched the sunrise. The first time seeing the sunrise in a completely different country, and it's hours before everybody I know and love on the other side of the world is going to see their sunrise. And that was pretty amazing to me. So I'm still completely off of adrenaline, and I finally get onto my other flight. So that flight's about an hour, maybe 2 hours from Incheon to Osaka. Or at least the whole thing is said and done in about 2 hours. So now we've gotten 14 hours, plus 5 hours, it's about 19, plus probably 2 more hours, so it's about 21. And then I have to get my bags, find the representative from my school, stand with them in the little hall as we wait for everybody, go with them into the truck, and take the truck all the way back to the university. They don't drop us off at the dorms. They drop us off a little bit of a distance from the dorms. So I've had to carry my bags when I picked them up in the airport. Nobody carried them for me. I don't know why I thought I was gonna get a chauffeur. Carried them all to the waiting area, carried my big 100-pound bags all the way from the car, all the way to the dorm, and up the room, and I finally get to my room. And it's really, really small, and there's another person in it, and there's barely any room or space between me, her, this little table, and I was not used to sleeping in a futon, so I'm like, I have to sleep on the floor, and I have not eaten in 22 hours. So I do the only thing that I could think of doing in that moment. And mind you, I am hungry, I am tired, my arms hurt, I'm overwhelmed, and I call my mom on Skype and completely break down crying. So what are the lessons from this experience? Number 1, don't overpack. Number 2, bring food with you on your flight. If you can't bring the food in to begin with, buy some stuff while you're waiting for your flight to take off. Number 3, get acquainted with the local area before you get there. That way, if you're starving, at least you know where the corner store is and you don't break down in a corner of your room, overwhelmed with what to do. And number 4, don't terrify your parents who are already really anxious about you going abroad by Skype calling them and crying hysterically. Anyway, that's it for today. This is the longest video. The next ones will be a bit shorter, but either way, I will see you next week. Bye-bye.